Practice qualifying is expected to return for NASCAR in 2022, but there is a catch to it. Streaming is going to be a bigger part of NASCAR's next TV deal, and multiple drivers' futures continue to be uncertain in the NASCAR Xfinity series. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with Violent Defense, as Violent Defense is going to be joining Roush Racing. They will have 4 primary split between Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman, so each of them will get 2. And this actually is also the first major sponsorship for Brad Keselowski, as they will sponsor Brad Keselowski 6 and the 17 for Chris Buescher through the 2023 season. Really cool to see that Roush Racing is continuing to pick up sponsors. I'm not sure how big of a company Violent Defense is, but it's really cool to see that Brad Keselowski is going to have at least some sponsorship going into next year. It's unknown how many sponsors Brad is going to have next year, but Brad will probably have a big say of what he's going to have. I'm really happy to see that Violent Defense is going to be sponsoring NASCAR. I'm really happy about that overall for sure. Welcome Violent Defense to NASCAR. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bailey Currey. As Bailey Currey is going to be driving a 15 for JD Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas. Remember, it was announced a few weeks ago that Colby Howard would be out of there, pretty much not running a majority of the race. In fact, I don't know if he's going to be running any more races for JD Motorsports this year. So they said they were making some decisions in regards to what drivers they're going to run. Really cool to see that Bailey Currey's back. I'm not sure how he's going to do this weekend. Again, I think he had a decent run in Vegas, if I'm not mistaken, this past time around when he drove for MyCarmen Racing. I'm not exactly sure. But really good to see that Bailey Currey's running a 15. I think the goal should be a top 30. I think that'd be a really good finish for that 15. It would help them in the owner's points position overall as well. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Dillon. As Ty Dillon is going to be driving a 31 for Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend at Las Vegas, with South Point Casino and Hotel sponsoring this weekend. Really cool to see that Ty Dillon's getting another solid opportunity in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. The Jordan Anderson cars have generally been really fast, and they've ran up front in a lot of the races, especially look at some of the drivers they've had, like Austin Dillon, his brother. Tyler Reddick's driven for the team. Jordan's also driven for his own organization, among others, and Josh Berry, too, not to mention, who driven for the organization, have had pretty decent success. They've gotten some top 10s this year, some top 15s. So I think if Ty Dillon can stay out of trouble and not have problems in the race, I think that Ty Dillon overall has a very solid shot of at least getting a top 15. If he gets a top 10 this weekend, though, it would be really cool. But again, I think he has a shot at a top 10, too, especially since look at his performance with Our Motorsports this year, where he's contended for top 10s and top 15s. I would not be surprised if Ty Dillon has a really good run. But it's good to see that Ty Dillon is getting another opportunity. It's unknown if potentially he could be going to GMS and Cup next year. We don't know that at this particular moment. But it's really cool to see that Ty Dillon's getting another opportunity with Jordan Anderson Racing here this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Carson Murray. As Carson Murray is going to be driving a 52 for Jimmy Means Racing this weekend at Las Vegas. I don't 100% know how to feel about this, to be perfectly honest with you. I think Carson Murray's has some decent statistics throughout his Xfinity Series career, but let's be real, he's ran a lot of those races in the back. Again, the equipment he has had is not really that good, to be perfectly honest with you, but at the same time, you're still in a cars that I've seen. I mean, the 17 car with J.J. Gill, he's ran top 15 and top 20. He's ran outside the top 25 and top 30, so I don't really know how to feel about this. I don't expect this car to also run up front either, because the 52 car has struggled way worse than they've had in a very long time, and I think that they're going to struggle to run up front, to be honest with you. If he can come out of this race with a top 35, I think that's a win for this organization. It's potentially possible, considering Vegas can't have a lot of rest in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But it's cool to see the Carson Murray is getting another opportunity, but I'm not expecting much out of it, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brett Moffitt. As Brett Moffitt is going to be driving a 25 for Rackley WAR Racing this weekend at Las Vegas. The last time Brett Moffitt competed in the NASCAR Truck Series is when he drove, I believe it was for the 37 for AM Racing at Knoxville. I believe he crashed out, if I'm not mistaken. He got involved with one of the wrecks early in the event and unfortunately fell out of the race. This is not a great truck, to be honest with you, but Josh Berry's made that truck look really good. They've contended for top 15s and top 20s. But I do think that Brett Moffitt, especially with his experience, I think that he's going to have a very good shot to be a really good contender in this event. Hopefully he'll do really good. If he can get a top 20, that would be really impressive. Hopefully Brett Moffitt will have a very strong run in the truck this weekend. Good luck to Brett Moffitt. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Keith McGee. As Keith McGee is going to be driving the 49 for CMI Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas. There's a big backstory behind why Keith McGee is driving the 49 truck this weekend. He actually, I think, earlier this year went to Las Vegas and basically gambled on his racing career. He basically won money at the casino and basically brought that money to the truck and was able to race this weekend. I'm not sure how Keith McGee is going to do this weekend. Keith McGee's ran a couple trucks where he hasn't really had too many fantastic runs. That being said, it does not display how good of a driver he is or not. It's just equipment isn't that great. That being said, though, I'm really happy Keith McGee is getting an opportunity, and I'm wishing him the best of luck this weekend with CMI Motorsports. If they get top 35, that'd be really good for that organization. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josh Berry. As Josh Berry is going to be driving to 1 for Junior Motorsports this weekend at Las Vegas. Once again, Michael Annett is out, dude. Basically, he re-injured himself, and he's been out for the last couple weeks. He had made his return for a few weeks before the last couple weeks, but this will be the second straight race, and actually the 6th race this year, where Michael Annett has not competed. I'm wishing Michael Annett the best of luck. I will say this. I think at this point, if you're Michael Annett, you probably should just, at this point, end your season. Maybe come back in 2022. Again, he does bring funding, so if he does feel better, he should make an opportunity to come back. But in regards to Josh Berry, we've seen him compete in this one car and be very, very fast and show a lot of speed. So I'm definitely looking forward to see what Josh Berry can do again this weekend. I think he has a shot at contending for a win. I really think that this one car has shown speed when Josh is in it. You look back at earlier this year in Michigan where Josh Berry led laps. That's the first time that one car has looked like it's a winning car pretty much all year long. So hopefully Josh Berry will give this car a good run for his money and will help Michael Annett in the owner's points. And hopefully he'll start out the playoffs for Xfinity really, really well, even though he's not competing for it. Hopefully he'll be able to start the playoffs really well this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Xfinity Series logo. Now, there has been some updates in regards to next year's Xfinity Series logo. Now, usually since around 2015, they've had the red banners on the Xfinity Series logo, but there's going to be a change. Instead of a red banner, there's actually going to be a purple banner this time around. So basically, they're just tweaking the color on the banner. To me, this actually looks really, really cool. I've always liked the red banner the Xfinity Series has, but I do like the purple on it as well. And I do think, especially during the plastic, especially on certain cars, I think it's going to look really, really cool. Again, I like the change overall. I'd rather have like some other color, but at the same time, I think purple's a really, really solid color. I like it a lot, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this out. I'm looking forward to see this playoff banner next year. I think it's going to look really, really cool, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about David Gilliland. As David Gilliland has been fined $1,500, suspended for one race, and has been placed on probation for the rest of this year. And the reason is because of non-compliant activities. Now, last week at the Truck Series race at Bristol, it is believed that David Gilliland had gotten into a pit road confrontation with, I believe, the 15 organization. He got into a fight. There had been a fight after the race between Drew Dollar's crew, because Drew Dollar basically got into Thad Moffitt, who is David Gilliland's car owner, basically wrecked that car, and there's been some trouble between those teams brewing. And once again, there have been issues, and apparently there have been a fight on pit road. I do think that ARCA is really, really sensitive when it comes to their penalties. I think that some of their penalties are really, really harsh. Suspending basically someone for one race for fighting on pit road, that's just really, really dumb. The MLB does it. MLB does it. I understand why the MLB does it. But at the same time, I'm not a big fan of them just suspending people because they want to. I'm not a big fan of that overall. Hopefully David Gilliland will be back really, really soon. There's actually coming up, I think, is the last race for the ARCA. I think ARCA's season finale is not too far away from being over, and the ARCA East Championship is pretty much over, and ARCA is pretty much about to be done with their entire season. So it's really frustrating that he's gotten suspended for that, but at the same time, getting into fight stuff on pit road, you gotta be careful with that because ARCA is really, really, really pushy when it comes to that, and hopefully he'll be back really, really soon. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the starting lineups for the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series races this weekend here at Las Vegas. Let's talk about the Truck Series first. So John Hunter Nemechek, who basically finished, I believe, second in the Truck Series race, will start on the pole for this weekend's race, and Chandler Smith, who won at Bristol, will be starting on the front row for that. My pick to win the Truck Series race is going to be the guy that's starting on the pole, John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek won the last time we were here in pretty much dominating fashion, and I expect that John Hunter will have that opportunity to do it once again. I think that John Hunter Nemechek is going to win the Truck Series race this weekend. Now let's jump out to the NASCAR Xfinity Series starting lineup. So Austin Cindric is going to be starting on the pole for that, and AJ Allmendinger is going to be starting on the front row for that as well. My pick to win the NASCAR Xfinity Series race is going to be AJ Allmendinger. AJ won the last time we were here at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and I think that speed, especially with how much momentum he has had over the last 4 or 5 weeks, I think that's going to come into play. And I think he's going to start off the playoffs in 2021 for Xfinity Series with a bang, and I think that he is going to win the Xfinity Series race at Las Vegas. And now let's finally jump up to the Cup Series starting lineup. So Kyle Larson is going to be starting on the pole. I believe it is Denny Hamlin is also going to be, I think it's Ryan Blaney starting on the front row for that as well. But my pick to win that is, of course, going to be Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson's been probably the best driver on the mile and a half this year, the second best when it comes to average. But Kyle Larson has been the best when it comes to drivers on the mile and a half this year, and I think that's going to come into play. And I think that Kyle Larson is going to win the NASCAR Cup Series race and will lock his way up into the round of 8 for the next round of the NASCAR Cup Series Plus. I think he gets it done. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about wet weather tires. Someone had asked Bob Pockrass in regards to what's the situation in regards to those wet weather tire tests. And he responded saying those short track tire oval wet tire tests is a little bit on the sideline at the moment, but expect them to start working on it again once everything is settled for the next gen car, and it will be a little bit before those wet weather tire tests are going to continue. If you remember earlier this year at Martinsville Speedway, NASCAR was testing wet weather tires to basically see how it reacts, because there's been a lot of rain delays over the last couple of years. And what they were testing was for if they could run them on short ovals like Bristol, like Bristol, like Martinsville, like Richmond. They were tested in Phoenix too. They were tested those just in case if weather came up, if it was damp on the track. They had drivers like Kyle Larson out there who were testing it as well, and they really didn't get official way to test it. But I understand why they're putting in a hold, to be perfectly honest. Again, I think their big focus right now is to get the next-gen car done. I'm not sure when these tire tests are going to be done. I would assume that most likely the next time we'll get another wet tire test, we'll probably be back in 2023 or 2022. I don't think we'll be seeing racing with wet weather tires anytime soon. I think it's going to be a few years. But again, they've been testing it. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But interesting, and we'll have to wait and see when the next time NASCAR is going to hold another wet weather tire test. We'll have to wait on that for sure. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, whereas we're going to talk about NASCAR in golf. Now, Bob Pockrass reported in regards to something that was reported in the Sports Illustrated for this week in regards to events that they're not going to be competing in. And what's very interesting is that NASCAR is not going to be going head-to-head with a couple of the major golf tournaments. The Masters, which is going to be taking place during the Martinsville night race weekend. The PGA Championship, which I believe is during the May 19th, which is the Mother's Day weekend or something like that. And the U.S. Open, which is going to be taking place on the off week. It's very interesting that NASCAR is not competing against those events. It's very interesting to me because, you know, NASCAR is not competing against, is trying to compete against the NFL. But what I will say, I think one of the biggest reasons why they're not trying to compete against those major events is a lot of NASCAR is one of the oldest audience when it comes to fandom. So that's probably one of the reasons why, to be honest with you, that NASCAR has decided to not go ahead and compete against those events, especially since, like I said, NASCAR's got an older demographic that's going to be competing at this time. And you have to remember that some younger fans, yes, younger fans do tune into some of those major events like the PGAs and those other major, and the Masters. There's some big fans of golf as well that watch NASCAR at the same time. So it's definitely very interesting that NASCAR is not going up against golf. I'm wondering what implications that will have going forward if NASCAR maybe in the future won't go up against major NFL games long term. I'm not sure at the particular moment, but interesting that NASCAR is not competing against golf events. I find that really interesting. I think it's really cool, though, that NASCAR isn't competing against those events, so I think it's really interesting. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2022 Ford F-150 body that was officially revealed. Now, all three NASCAR Truck Series bodies are going to be revealed. They're doing some changes in regards to the bodies and the composites, the way they look like. For the truck, for the Chevy, and the Toyota have not been revealed at this time, but they're eventually going to get revealed. But I have to say about this Ford F-150, it looks so much better than this year's Ford F-150. It looks really, really sleek. I think did an excellent job on this. I think did a really good job. It looks really, really cool. Again, it's better than the last year's, I definitely have to say. And the tweaks that I think they're going to do are going to make it really, really cool. I know that next gen is going to have some affiliate with it. Maybe there's some work in regards to that too. But I think it's really cool that the Ford F-150 looks like that. I think they did a very solid job on it. Both other bodies should be eventually revealed really, really soon, but I think they did an excellent job on this body. It looks really, really cool. I like the blue, I like the stripes, all this stuff on it. It looks awesome, and I'm looking forward to see this next year. I'm looking forward to see the Chevy and the Toyota. I think that they'll do a really good job on it too, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 2311 documentary. Now, Denny Hamlin basically gave us an update in regards to the 2311 documentary, and he says that filming is officially complete for the 2311 documentary, and it should be out in January on Netflix. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is going to be a massive documentary that's coming out for 2311 in their first year, and in-depth details on what's been going on behind the scenes. It's going to be similar to what the Drive to Survive series is, but instead of just basically focusing on just all the drivers that F1 does, it's only focusing on 2311 and Bubba Wallace in their first year as an organization. Now, we've been waiting to hear more details in regards to that, but the fact that filming's done, I'm definitely really, really excited for it, because it's not only is it big for someone like Bubba Wallace, but I think it could be really big for NASCAR overall as well, to have a series like the 2311 documentary, to have NASCAR under. You look at Formula One this year, and they've had huge increases in ratings this year. You look at their ratings, they've had a lot of races, especially this year, in the 1 million range. So the fact that they are basically done with the filming process, I think is going to be huge for the sport as a whole. I think it's going to make the sport grow as a whole. I'm not sure how much, but I do think that if this documentary succeeds, and documentaries do extremely well on Netflix. You look at the Tiger King documentary, that was one of the most popular out there, and you see people still talking about it even to this day. So the fact that we're very close to seeing the 2311 documentary, which will be out in a couple of months, I'm really looking forward to that. It'll give me one reason to watch Netflix, and I think it'll give you guys a reason to watch Netflix. And it might not just bring you hardcore fans there, but it might bring casual fans as well. And maybe if people have never watched NASCAR, but they see Bubba Wallace in 2311 racing, they're going to check it out. They're going to check out not just Kurt Busch, because this will affect Kurt Busch a little bit as well, because Kurt Busch is probably part of that documentary too, but people are also going to root for Bubba Wallace, and it's going to bring new fans into the sport. I think everything here is really, really good, and hopefully the documentary will be really, really good going forward. Hopefully it'll be great. So I really want to see this documentary. See, Netflix has put a lot of hard work and a lot of earned money into this, so I'm really looking forward to this documentary. Hope the documentary is good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stephen Parsons. As Stephen Parsons was officially revealed on Race Hub a couple of nights ago that he will be driving full-time for BJ McLeod Motorsports in 2022, with Sokol Digitally being the major sponsor backing for him. Now, Stephen Parsons has been driving the NASCAR Xfinity Series the last couple of years, but this will be his first official full season in 2022. I'm really happy to see that Stephen Parsons is getting a full-time opportunity. I've seen some pretty good runs out of Stephen Parsons in the BJ McLeod Motorsports cars. I've seen him run in the top 15 and top 20 in these cars, and I think that he's helped this organization form a little bit better, and sometimes it hasn't formed as good. But that being said, especially not to mention he does bring that funding, which is what BJ McLeod Motorsports is going to need. I think having a driver to wrap around and focus on for the whole entire year could be beneficial. Now, what are my expectations for Stephen Parsons going into 2022? I think overall top 20 points finish should be really the overall goal for this team. If he can get a top 20 points finish, especially with the equipment that he's in, I think that'd be really, really impressive. But realistically, I think he'll finish in the top 25 in points. But I think overall, the goal of BJ McLeod Motorsports can take some steps going forward. I think overall, going into next year, that this team could finish in the top 20 points. I really think that if they put their eggs in the basket of Stephen Parsons, especially how good of a driver Stephen Parsons really, really is, I think that he could be a huge benefactor to this team. Really happy to see that Stephen Parsons is getting another opportunity to go full-time. I think it's going to be hugely beneficial for this team overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go and jump into the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Bristol TV ratings from this past weekend. According to Adam Stern, NBCSN earned a 1.20 rating and 2.2 million viewers for Saturday night's Bass Pro Shops Enter-8 night race, basically fat from last year. The ratings were slightly down, 1.24 in 2020, but viewership was slightly up, so 2.13 million in 2020. Really good to see that the ratings at least are being consistent. At least they do remain flat, which I wish they would have gone up a little bit, but they did go up a little bit in viewership, which is really, really good. You did have a lot of major events going on either, and for the fact that it did get 2.3 million viewers on NBCSN is really not bad, to be perfectly honest. I still think for some people, they probably think that are casual, probably think it's a little bit earlier in the year, which is why I don't think they had as big a viewership increase here. That being said, though, the fact that it didn't go down and at least slightly went up in viewership, I think is really awesome to see overall. And I think the more that this event gets promoted and stuff, that's one thing. There has been a little bit more promotion NASCAR has been doing, but I think they've got to do more and more promotion and wrote these events out a lot more, especially for a playoff cutoff race. You got to have events. And that's another thing, too, is I think another reason why this race didn't do as well as it could have is on Saturday night, they tend to do about 30% less viewership on Saturday night. If this race is on a Sunday afternoon, they probably have about 2.5 to 2.6 or even a little bit higher than that. But at the same time, the ratings for Saturday night are not too bad. They're actually better, at least than Richmond's ratings, which only had a 1.7 million viewers. But it's really cool to see that at least the Bristol ratings are staying a little bit consistent overall. I'm really happy about that overall for sure. Continuing on that, Adam Stern also reported in regards to NASCAR ratings. He says there's now been 5 straight Cup Series races that have earned a year-over-year increase in viewership, the longest streak since 2013. To me, that is really, really good to see that they haven't had an increase in viewership over the last 2 years for the first time since 2013. But here's the big thing to know. Over the last couple years, NASCAR in the last 4 or 5 races, for whatever reason, has a huge decrease in ratings. And what I'm worried about going into the later stages of the year, if NASCAR doesn't keep this up, that they're going to have a huge drop in ratings at the end of this year. You look back at 2019 and 2020, they've had huge decreases in ratings in the last couple of years. One, I think it's because the season is really, really long, and you also do have the NFL calendar that is not really helping that situation either. So to me, I just wish that NASCAR, hopefully we can keep the ratings up and we don't have that major decrease like we had the last couple of years. But that's all I'm really worried about in regards to that. If we can keep the ratings up, at least in some aspects, some sort of capacity, I think that'll be really, really good. At least it's good to see the ratings are continuing to stay up. But what I'm worried about right now going as we get farther down the road is that ratings are going to decrease. And I think that's because fans are going to get tired of the season and fans are just going to quit watching. That's what I'm worried about. But hopefully that isn't the case and we can keep the ratings up going forward. Hopefully that is going to be the case. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. Now, a couple of nights ago on Monday night, it was revealed on Door Bumper Clear Box, and they were talking about, and what they said was that Sheldon Creed will have a good teammate in 2022. Now, really, that doesn't entail too much, but what that entails to me is that potentially My Slider could be out of Richard Childress Racing in 2022. If they're mentioning a good teammate next year, and I know they've had some jabs on My Slider in the past as well, I don't think that is a really good sign for My Slider. And let's talk first about My Slider real quick. I don't think that My Slider has performed up to expectations. Yes, he does have one win this year, which is really, really good. But outside of that win, he's absolutely struggled this year. Yes, he was able to make the positive course of that win, but outside of that win, he only has like 4 or 5 top 10 throughout the 2021 season. And his only top 5 this year is that win at Homestead Miami Speedway this year. Again, he got lucky with that win too because Noah Gragson had problems. If it wasn't for that, he could be on the verge of missing the playoffs this year. I like My Slider a lot, and he does bring some funding, which could help him going into next year. But I don't think My Slider is the driver that deserves 100% be at Richard Childress Racing. There's other drivers that I think that deserve to be there. And I'll talk about drivers that I think could fit a lot better job, who they could be mentioning next year. You have some drivers like Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. I still think that there's a chance he could go to Spire next year. But if he doesn't go to Spire, I think that if Richard Childress Racing would be foolish to not pick up a driver like Ryan Preece next year, especially, I think he is a generational talent. I really think he's a driver that hasn't been performing great because, again, the equipment that he has is not really good in my honest opinion. That being said, though, I'm not sure who they're going to choose next year. Maybe like Matt DiBenedetto comes into fruition. Maybe Matt DiBenedetto goes to that second Richard Childress Racing car. I think Matt DiBenedetto would be a very solid choice. I think Matt would be actually pretty competitive. I think Matt's been better since he's gotten work to Jonathan Hassler. He could choose him right there. I'm not sure who they're going to choose next year in regards to that, but I find it interesting they said good teammate because, again, My Slider, like I said, does bring funding. I think if they're still going to be looking at someone like My Slider to bring into the camp next year just because My Slider has been with this team for the last couple of years and he does bring funding. But if they don't choose My Slider, I think that potentially there's a couple other drivers like a Ryan Preece. Maybe Zane Smith for all we know. Zane Smith's part of GMS's camp and maybe they're trying to recruit Zane Smith in the organization next year. Zane Smith actually performed pretty decent when he did drive for Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, but very interesting that they mentioned good teammate and not mention My Slider because, again, they didn't mention My Slider. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but interesting they did not mention good teammate for next year. As I'm currently editing this video, Brad Keselowski was talking about potential sponsors for next year with Roush Racing. He says that he's had amazing conversation sponsors for 2022, but nothing to announce yet. He expects one main announcement following the 2022-21 season. Now, I think one of the reasons why Brad Keselowski has not announced any sponsors for next year for Roush Racing, despite Violent Defense basically announcing that they were going to sponsor him for a few races next year, I think the big reason in regards to that is because of one reason and one reason only. And the reason that is because he's currently still driving for Team Penske, and I think that he is contractually obligated, since he is currently driving for Team Penske right now, that he's not really allowed to say what sponsor he's working with for next year. Now, what sponsors do I think are going to work with Brad Keselowski next year? I think potentially Discount Tire could jump over and work with him next year. Look back historically with Discount Tire, they sponsored Roush Racing up in 2009, and in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, they sponsored the 6 car, which had Discount Tire on there when David Reagan drove the car, among others who drove that 6 car throughout the entirety. And I think it'd be really cool for a realignment with Discount Tire. Now, it is believed that Discount Tire is also going to be sponsoring Team Penske next year, but why doesn't Discount Tire just go and sponsor multiple teams next year? That'd be good. Why not sponsor a bunch of Ford teams? I think it'd be really, really cool. Maybe Fastall is going to sponsor Brad for a few races. I'm not sure what sponsors are going to work with Brad, but it's really cool to hear that Brad is talking to sponsors and that there's amazing conversations going on in regards to potential sponsors for 2022. Really happy about that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Heinrich. As Daniel Heinrich was speaking to the media and really speaking to Bob Pockrass today, and Bob Pockrass had asked him in regards to what is going on for his 2022 plans. And he says that he's close to announcing his 2022 plans, but also said there is still some stuff up in the air. Now, for those of you who don't know, Daniel Heinrich drives for Joe Gibbs Racing in the number 18 car with Poppy Bank basically backing him, and he's currently sitting in the NASCAR Xfinity Series Plus with a chance to run potentially for the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship. Now, you look at Joe Gibbs Racing, there has been some rumors in regards to potentially them downsizing to a 3-car operation for 2022. We are expecting that Ty Gibbs is going to go to that team full-time next year. We don't know the futures of drivers like Harrison. We don't know the future of Brandon Jones currently or Daniel Heinrich at the moment right now. If you want my honest opinion, I feel like that Daniel Heinrich is very still likely to return to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. I think that Daniel Heinrich is a very, very good and a very, very solid driver. And yes, he does not have a win, but one thing about Daniel Heinrich is that dude does not destroy equipment. And he's had a lot of bad luck this year, too. He's been close to winning races so many times in 2021. I just think right now a lot of bad luck is really, really affecting him. But I do know that there's potentially maybe John Hunter could go there as well next year. There's been talk maybe he can be one of the drivers that does go over to there next year. They could still remain a 4-car camp, but there's been some rumors they potentially could go to a 3-car organization next year. But if you want my honest opinion, I think that he returns to Joe Gibbs Racing, and the big reason why I think he's going to return to JGR in 2022 is because of that Poppy Bank sponsorship. Poppy Bank hasn't sponsored Daniel Heinrich overall for the last couple of years, and I think that he has proven that he can get it done on a week-by-week basis. Yes, he's not winning races like, his teammates are, or let's be real, Ty Gibbs is the only one that's won so far with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2021 this year, and he's only one has been, they've really put a lot of focus on Ty Gibbs, of course, the grandson of Joe Gibbs. So, but Daniel Heinrich's been really consistent throughout this year. He's been a top 3 or top 4 driver. Despite not winning races, he's been the best driver so far to not win a race in 2021, and I think he absolutely deserves to go back to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022. I'm not sure what this entails going forward. Maybe he also goes to the Cup Series for a little bit. Maybe he races in the Cup Series in a couple races, maybe with Gaunt Brothers Racing, and does get a few starts there. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, but it's very interesting that Daniel Heinrich's future continues to remain uncertain. Again, he says he's very close, and I will say this. I think he's going back to Joe Gibbs Racing. I think he's returning. I think Joe Gibbs' organization likes him. I think he's proven himself this year again, and I think he's proven that he can actually drive a car. He just needs to get a win. It seems like every time he has a chance to win these races, like at Bristol, something goes terribly wrong, or the car completely falls off, and they don't get the car and adjustments right on it. So hopefully they'll go back there next year. I think he deserves to go back to the organization next year in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jeb Burton. Jeb Burton was speaking to the media a couple days ago, and he says that he's really unsure about his future. He says these could be my last 7 races. I don't know what is going to happen. Now, there's a lot of reasons why his future remains uncertain at the moment. It was announced last week, and Chris Rice, who is the team president at College Racing, basically confirmed that Nutrien G has basically dropped their sponsorship from College Racing, and I did say that there's potential that this could affect overall the College Racing organization. I think Jeff Burton is a very, very good driver. I think he's proven himself this year, and he's proven himself throughout his NASCAR career that he can get it done. He got his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series win at Talladega, and he's been consistently a top 10 driver throughout this year. I think he has overall been the weakest driver at the organization this year, but that being said, I think that doesn't mean he's been a bad driver. He's been a very, very solid driver this year, and I do think that he has a good opportunity. I think he should return to College Racing next year, but you remember, you do have some other potential drivers that could go to this team next year who do bring some funding. You have Kaz Grala, who does bring a little bit of funding, and Kaz Grala has been really good in their Cup Series program this year, and he could maybe replace Justin Haley next year. Remember, Justin Haley is going full-time with the organization, but you also have Matt DiBenedetto who potentially go over to College Racing next year. I mean, there were rumors he was going to go there, and then it turned out to not be true, but maybe in the future, Matt DiBenedetto goes there. If he doesn't go to RCR, maybe he goes over to that organization next year. To me, I think that Jeff Burton absolutely deserves to come back to College Racing next year. I think he needs another year to be with the team. He's proven himself throughout his NASCAR Xfinity Series career, but again, one thing that he struggles with is funding a little bit, though. He does bring a little bit of funding from state water heaters, which could keep him in the organization next year if he's able to return. Hopefully, Chris Rice and his team can figure something out to keep their organization at 3 cars. I know they said in the past they want to keep 3 cars, but I don't think at the time they knew the Nutrien AG was going to drop their funding with the organization next year. Again, it's really unfortunate Jeff Burton's future could be in jeopardy. And again, it's good drivers, again, losing good opportunities and good rides because of funding and other drivers coming in with funding. That's not sending a diss to Kaz Grala, or that's not sending a diss to Matt DiBenedetto, but let's be for real. Jeff Burton is a very, very good driver. I think he absolutely deserves another opportunity. He's proven it this year. He's proven it with College Racing this year, and he proved it with Junior Motorsports and just had a lot of bad luck last year. But I think he absolutely deserves an opportunity, and hopefully he will get that opportunity to return to the organization next year, because I think Jeff Burton's a very good driver, and I think he does 100% deserve an opportunity to return to College Racing in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the streaming game in regards to NASCAR. Now, there was an article that was reported by a Twitter user called Awful Announcing, who does media work as well, and he wrote an article talking about the streaming will play a larger role in NASCAR's next TV contract. But there was one quote in there that's very, very important to note. Some streaming elements will definitely be in place a larger role in the next deal, which is expected to come out in 2025. Now, like I just mentioned, NASCAR's TV contract currently goes from 2015 all the way up to 2024. And NASCAR, I think, is acknowledging that the streaming game has become bigger. When they signed that deal back in 2013, I don't think that NASCAR realized at the time that streaming was going to play a much bigger role and a much bigger factor in the future than it is now. And you look at IndyCar this year, they've been trying to get into that streaming game as well. You look at Peacock. I see a lot of people basically saying, oh, NASCAR is going to put their NASCAR Cup Series races behind a paywall. That's exactly what's going to happen. And no, that's not what NASCAR is going to do. NASCAR is still going to put all their racing content, all like their Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series races. They're going to put all those races on main TV and all on the major channels and stuff. What they're basically looking is putting stuff like their things, their live streams they upload on YouTube, like their old races, like a streaming service upload old races, and other content like that's on the other shows, like other shows they put on those other major networks. But I think that what this really entails is that NASCAR is looking at streaming to the future, and I think you look at everything, NASCAR is going into that direction, and they can't really go there right now. They're stuck in a box, because right now they can't do that at the moment, because they're stuck in a box with the current TV deal that they've been set in for the last couple years. And there was one big factor this year. You look at NBCSN, that channel is expected to shut down next year, and NASCAR is going to have to move a lot of their content over to USA, and not to mention, they're already putting some of their stuff on NBC behind a paywall with Peacock. You look at IndyCar next year, they have only one race, so now it's going to be on Peacock, but it's unknown currently at the moment if that race even is going to happen with Canada's rules right now. To me, it's definitely really interesting. NASCAR is looking at the streaming game a lot bigger than it is, and I think that NASCAR is going to have to go behind the times. I understand why fans are not happy about this, but at the same time, you're not going to have your races going behind a paywall. It's just going to be certain things, but NASCAR has to get ahead with the times and keep up with the times because streaming is becoming a much bigger thing right now, and cable is dying. Cable is a much bigger dying brand. Most people are cutting the cord on cable because it's going to cost a lot more money in regards to that. So to me, I definitely think NASCAR is going to make the right call here, and I think that when it comes to the next TV deal, depending on that, because there's even talk right now that F1 in the next TV contract for F1, that Netflix could have a major, major part in playing in that, showing live races on Netflix. That's huge. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, how big of a streaming game it will play a part into that, but we'll see what happens going forward, but NASCAR has to get ahead with the times, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about practice in qualifying. Now, it was first reported by the Door Bumper Clear podcast, and basically a couple people on that podcast, Hannah Newhouse, who does reporting for MRN, and Brett Griffin confirmed that practice qualifying is expected to 100% return in 2022. But there is a catch to next year's practice in qualifying. Bob Pockers reported yesterday, and someone had asked in regards to what are the plans with practice and qualifying for 2022. And he says that practice qualifying is expected to return in Cup next year. Sounds like NASCAR is leaning towards short 20 to 30 minute practices with no adjustments allowed underneath the car, then straight to qualifying, then impound for a majority of events, but some will have another practice is still being finalized at this time. I don't know what NASCAR is thinking here, to be honest with you. I don't understand this. What is the point of having practice if you are not allowed to adjust on the cars? And what's the point of not really having practice if it's only 20 to 30 minutes? Here's how I would do practice qualifying, in my honest opinion. I would honestly have one hour practice session, just one long 1 hour practice session where teams are allowed to make adjustments. Then you can have qualifying right after that and then have tech. And the reason a lot of people bring this up is because, NASCAR is basically trying to save a lot of money, and NASCAR doesn't want to go through two techs. Okay, so here's how you do it. You have one practice tech. You have a tech before practice so the teams can go out, and then right after qualifying is complete, you tech the cars there. You don't need to have a tech for practice and go through tech there and then go to qualifying. That's just so dumb, and sometimes I think NASCAR doesn't think the logic of some of those things. And I love the sport but for the love of God, the way that NASCAR is thinking about some of the ways they're doing stuff just doesn't make sense to me. Why are they doing it like this? It doesn't make sense. And what NASCAR is thinking is like, oh, we're just going to have to, again, I don't understand it. For me, I think that I think we've proven this for the last couple of years. We don't need 2 or 3 practice sessions. We only need one practice session, one happy hour long, 1 hour session to be able to get the cars up to tech and up to speed and ready to go. I don't think we need to have more than that. I think if we have more than that, that is too much. And I understand in NASCAR what they're trying to do. They're trying to come in there and they're trying to save as much money as possible, and I completely understand that. But at the same time, this is not the way you're you're not going to make fans happy at the same time, not to mention that, because again, it's bigger for the track as well, and again, it's for the fan experience. I think you have 1 long hour practice session. You're also going to ruin the weekends as well. It's one thing I will say is you're going to hurt the weekends overall for NASCAR fans going to it. And I think that it's going to make F1 weekends better and IndyCar weekends better than NASCAR weekends for the fan experience. I think it's bigger for the fan experience. Again, I understand what NASCAR is trying to do here. They're trying to overall save money, but at the same time, I don't understand cutting practice qualifying to 20 to 30 minutes because, again, what's the point of practice? What's the point of practice if you're going to be cutting the cost? I just do not understand that, in my honest opinion. I think it's going to be a bad call overall for NASCAR if we have to do this for the sake of saving teams money. And I know that there are some drivers. I've seen Josh Bilicki comment about this too, saying, what's the point of having if we're not allowed to make adjustments? Teams should be allowed to make adjustments. That's what practice should be. And this stuff could be fixed, like some of the electronic problems. If they can't adjust the electronic problem stuff, and I've seen people saying that, sim work and all that stuff. The sim is not perfect. I don't know why NASCAR is so focused on the sim work with iRacing and stuff when they can honestly fix the problems in that situation. Again, I am happy that practice qualifying is coming back next year. I'm really happy about that. But the way that they are going to do it next year just does not, in my sincere opinion, make a lot of sense. So, Anyway, that is for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support our page as well. Let's get you below for that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about NASCAR's current future practice qualifying procedures? Do you like them or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about NASCAR getting into the streaming game? And do you think that's going to be great for the sport or not? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time with some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.